Welcome to Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. We appreciate KCHF TV and Issues and Answers for introducing you to candidates. We've invited the candidates who are running for Bernalillo County Sheriff, and those who have accepted have been guests on my program. And I have a guest today on my program, Pat Ruiloba. He is running for Bernalillo County Sheriff, and we know the primary is June 7th. And I'll characterize Pat's career as curtailing school to jail pipeline, stopping that pipeline. We're going to find out how he has done it, how he continues to do it, because even though he spent 30 years in law enforcement and a state legislator, he now has his own private business where he continues to help schools and kids, mostly probably teens, to stay on the right track, not throw them away in jail, not put them into that pipeline, but to give them a future. We're going to find out what he's doing now, what he's done in the past 30 years as an Albuquerque police officer, as a detective in various units in the police department, what he did as a state legislator, and what he wants to do as your Bernalillo County Sheriff. We'll be back with Pat Ruiloba right after this. Stay with us.
The National Education Association of New Mexico, a union of teachers and school staff, believes every child deserves to learn at a school that inspires their imagination, cultivates their curiosity, and ensures a fulfilling life. Public schools should provide all our students with small class sizes and one-on-one attention. NEA New Mexico asks you to join us so together we can end the teacher and staff shortage and invest in our public education system once and for all. Sponsored by NEA New Mexico.
I got Pat Ruiloba with me. He's running for Bernalillo County Sheriff, and he just loves, I think he has a passion for these kids, passion for safety, and passion for our community. And it all started back in the South Valley and Adobe Acres, I think.
That's right, yeah.
Pat Ruiloba, thank you for being a part of this program, and thank you for tossing your hat into the race for Bernalillo County Sheriff, on top of everything that you've done in your life. So take it away, Pat Ruiloba.
Well, thank you for the invitation to meet with you, and I think your show is fantastic. The fact that you're highlighting candidates is just a great opportunity for people to get to know who the candidates are. So I am running for sheriff. I was asked by people in my community that I trust and respect to consider this position after I left the legislature. And after some thought about it, thinking about the why, you know, I love my family and I love this community. And when you love something, you want to take care of it and you want to serve it. And I think my experience has really kind of led to this opportunity to be the best candidate and the best sheriff for this particular race.
You're a graduate of Rio Grande High School.
Yep.
You attended UNM. You became a police officer at a young age as a patrol officer, then detective in various organized crime units, violent crimes, narcotics. That led to a 20-year career, and then you ran for state legislator.
Yep.
For 6 years.
Yep, so my time with APD really kind of helped me understand the climate of crime, how to investigate crimes, whether they be misdemeanors or high-scale drug trafficking investigations that involved federal partnerships. Many of these opportunities that I was provided within the police department really taught me about why crime happens. There was time that I spent as a school resource officer at Highland High School, and there were some significant challenges at that school with gang activity and other violations of the law. And the approach that we took at that school was that arresting these young people didn't work. So we created I got the blessing from my supervisor at the time. This was not something that we did, to create an alternative to arrest program that involved conversations with the family, an agreement, and expectations for the students. And it wasn't really about the work that they were performing to, you know, beautify the community and campus, but more it provided an opportunity for me to build relationships with them. I worked with about 16 students, 16 or 17 affiliated youth. And by the end of our fourth year there, 14 of them graduated high school, and I see them today at church or in the community with their families. So that attitude, that mind shift back then really kind of directed my approach to how to police. I learned how to police by working in a school.
By working in the schools.
Yeah.
So why do we have the crime? You learned that mainly at Heidelin High School.
Well, I think part of how to change the culture of crime I learned working in the schools. But we have crime right now because we're not addressing the drug epidemic. I've worked undercover, buying drugs, going after high-scale and mid-scale drug organizations, and we're just not seeing that right now. So we have a
So you say we used to do that in the police department in Albuquerque? But
there was several detectives, both in the sheriff's department and within the Albuquerque Police Department, that was their focus, and that has changed. So I want to bring that back. When I talk about changing the culture of crime, we see right now for the last, I want to say 5 years, where we have young people, not necessarily involved in the property crime and stuff, but they're now involved in gun crimes, homicides, robberies. They want to get involved in drug dealing now, which is why we're seeing a lot of the violence. And many of those young people have some common factors. One is that they were suspended or expelled from school, and the other is that they were runaways at some point. So
that was their common factor.
Those are very consistent factors with young people.
But you knew that expelling students isn't the answer. Of course, you have to keep the school safe. And again, you're working as a business owner, implementing safety techniques throughout the state of New Mexico, advising school districts on how to keep their schools safe. But you found out that expelling kids may not be the answer.
Right, and we have to keep them safe. So what we were using is restorative justice practices. And really what that is it really does two things. It builds relationships and it repairs harm. So the focus really is to engage with young people and their families to let them know, like, your behavior is affecting other people, just not that one person. And what's really awesome about it is that the young people that we were involved with and engaging quickly understood, that this incident they're having with this other person isn't just about that person. There's a ripple effect because of their unwanted behavior. And what we were able to do, which deterred ongoing behavior, unwanted behavior, is the students came up with their own expectations to make sure that the behavior didn't occur again. And we started seeing an immediate change because we invested during these conversations with the students, their voice and what they felt they needed to resolve the issue. So it's not much different than what schools are trying to do. We just need to grow it out. Both schools, high schools that I worked at, within a couple years, we started seeing a safer campus. Like, I wasn't dealing with students bringing guns. We'd have to talk to the freshmen because they come in pretty excited. But once they went through some of our processes there, we had a safe campus. We weren't worried about some of the things that we're seeing today. So I'm going to really be focusing as sheriff on, our deputies that are in the school receiving the restorative practice training, so then they can understand how to engage the students and the families to make our schools more safe.
So do we have sheriff in the schools?
We do, and I'm going to just say they are doing a great job. But one of the things that I realized in my law enforcement career that kept me safe in all those units you were talking about was training, right? As a legislator, I passed legislation that identified what a school resource officer is, a title, and required training for that role. It is such a huge responsibility for law enforcement to be able to be in those schools and interact with that community.
How often does each high school, Pat, have in the county, and which includes the city, a resource officer from the police department or the sheriff's department?
So the deputies are really providing that opportunity in our county schools. We, of course, have APS Police Department, which I've worked for about 10 years. They have officers in the school. And APD, I think, it has some, but I don't know the total number.
But in the county, we have sheriff deputies. For the whole school day, or?
Yep, so they're primarily in the high and middle schools, and I think that's the best location for them. I experienced working in a middle school. It's a great way to interact with young people, start building the relationship, but then continue working on supporting those youth and families with resources in the high school.
Yeah, continue, start them young, trusting. So as sheriff, what would you like to see different? You'd like to start the training that you've just discussed. What else would you like to share with the public about what you would like to do as sheriff?
No, that's a great question. When I talk to people about law enforcement and mental health, they really go to where we're at right now, and it's how law enforcement is responding to people who are in crisis, and I think that is something that needs to continually evolve. But when the question that I'm looking for, based on my experience, is the mental health of the police officer. Being a law enforcement officer for 30 years and seeing all the things that I've seen, almost getting killed in the line of duty really affects our mental health. And there's a stigma, just like there is in the community, that kind of creates a barrier for our law enforcement officers to get that support. So that's going to be a really big focus. And my attitude about it is if we have an officer who has the opportunity to get support, that's going to benefit the community, right? Because we're not going to have that overlap of incidents that were occurring in their past experience bleed out to an experience that they're dealing with now.
And that's mainly training that would help with that?
Well, I think a little bit would be counseling, but changing how our law enforcement officers are currently receiving it. So really focusing on providing a community resource that those opportunities aren't attached to the department. You know what I'm saying?
No.
It's interesting, the mental health culture in police. So typically they're employees of the department, and a lot of times our officers and deputies won't go because of that connection. We don't want to have that, you're seeing,
yeah, correct.
So
of course not.
Really changing that culture about how our law enforcement officers receive that support.
So perhaps outside the department.
Community-based. I am a big community guy.
Well,
all the answers are in the community. We just have to build those relationships with them to get what we need.
You were the president of your Adobe Acres Neighborhood Association, and you felt that you had great success, even
We
perhaps
did.
greater than the successes at APS. Why is that? I know the answer, because of the community.
We had, so we were having some issues in the neighborhood. It was something, my mom was a past president, and when I retired from the police department, she said, Mijo, you're gonna do this. And I'm like, Mom, I just retired, And she's like, no, you need to do it. So I took a lot of the skills that I had as a police officer and started engaging the community. But what I realized is that many of them didn't understand when, how, and why you should call the police. So we organized, and we had monthly meetings, newsletters, like saturated the community. There's 630 some homes in my community, and we educated them. And within months, we started seeing a change in crime. We improved our engagement. We built relationships with the sheriff's department, fire department, all the county resources, because it wasn't just about crime. We wanted to make sure that our neighbors had information about all the county resources. So to this day, I still live in the neighborhood I grew up in. I think I'm one of the few candidates who actually live in the unincorporated area, and that means a lot. But we're not having the issues in the South Valley that we're seeing across the city. So the South Valley has historically been a really connected community. And I'm just going to build what I learned in our neighborhood association and really train our officers how to do that outreach throughout the city.
And that's because in your community, they know about the resources, or criminals don't go into your community, or the people who would maybe become a criminal don't because of the support of the community? What's the reason?
I think all of that. So once we educate our people in our neighborhood who you should call and when you should call, we were getting a greater response. I always told them, look, if something don't look right, call the police. Because at the very minimum, there's a record in our data system. And we would be able to track and see patterns, and then be able to provide resources. Now, we have so much technology around data-driven policing and this and that, and I think it's wonderful. But if we're not hearing it directly from the people that we're serving in real time,
you can't have the data.
We're going to keep chasing. We're going to keep chasing the mouse. So I want to go to where the rubber meets the road, and that's engaging people. That's the way I was raised by my mom and my dad. That's what I did as a police officer. Like, I wasn't successful in many of the things that I did because, you know, I was good at it. It's because I outreached and had partners in the community.
What kind of crime are we seeing out in the unincorporated area, other than Adobe Acres, where you have the community working together? What types of things do we see?
So what I understand, and some of the issues that I dealt with, we still have issues with auto theft, and that's directly attributed to the drugs. We have drug issues. We have high suspension and expulsion rates in some of those areas within our unincorporated community. We're seeing domestic violence. That is something that I think is really driving some of the challenges in the community. But at the end of the day, we're not indivisible from having the impacts of drugs. You know, it's everywhere.
Pat, is that it? Everything's connected
Everything.
to drugs and addiction?
All
Truly.
the crimes we're having right now are the root cause is drugs. So,
what is your feeling about our securing our border with Mexico?
well, I think that it's important to have security. And one of the last roles that I had in the police department was working interdiction on the interstate with the drug dog. His name was Doobie. He was a golden lab. I did not name him. But I realized then just how much drugs come in and out of New Mexico. So once again,
How much is leaving New Mexico?
No,
Coming in,
passing through.
passing, okay?
And what I've seen and understand in the last probably decade is now we're becoming a hub for drugs to come in and then they get dispersed. So we're still seeing narcotics coming from, Phoenix and California, which means that we need to start addressing that behavior on our interstates through interdiction and working with our federal agencies to identify those patterns. But we have to get down to the root cause. And when we think about the drug situation with our homeless community, they've got to be getting their drugs somewhere. Somebody is providing them with drugs. I want to find out who that is and stop that, right? We have people that are in our communities that are selling drugs. They may not be at the mid or high level, but we want to intervene earlier so they don't rise to those levels. So really, the only way we can accomplish that is by having those connections with people that live in those communities. They have to trust us to call us first. So rebuilding the trust between the community and law enforcement is going to be one of my biggest priorities as well.
Rebuilding the trust between law enforcement and the community is yours.
There's not a lot of trust right now.
Pat, that's because of use of force, deadly use of force?
I think there's been a lot of factors, change in leadership, the change of culture in policing, what's happening nationally, like it all bleeds in. But I think Bernalillo County is a community where we can change that because of who we are and our connections to one another. We just have to get together, put away whatever problems were happening that broke those relationships and start new. But we need someone who has the ability to do that. And my time in the legislature has really taught me how to, be patient and listen. Those are things that I learned from the young people I worked with in the schools, and don't judge.
Yeah.
Let's just get together and work it out.
What's interesting, again, it's heartbreaking that we have such a problem with drugs in our community because it just robs people of their lives. And it seems like the schools where you worked for a number of years with these young people, if they were to get on the right track, why would they veer off and choose drugs if they're happy and successful in their lives?
I will say that my experience working in the schools, I've seen students that were on the right road to a criminal lifestyle.
Oh, wait, we're on the right road?
They were on the right road to go on the wrong way. But those interventions that we had that were just simple conversations and support and guidance changed that. We had the same situation at the last high school I worked at Trisco Heritage, and we turned that whole community around. Our referral rates to our juvenile justice center even dropped. So if you can imagine,
Yeah.
just what an impact a law enforcement officer can make in a school, if they're doing proactive work and being a resource, it can change crime in our community.
It sounds like it could, starting early on.
And
Instead of finding those drug dealers and who's selling to the homeless, maybe we don't have to find that if you start early and cut out the reason, the purpose. Why are the kids doing the drugs? They're not happy with their lives, Pat?
No, I just think that if they're not in school, they're going to be out in the street, and there's danger out in the street. That's saying that, kids need to be in school is important, but if they're not, where are they going to end up? And we're seeing that now.
As a state legislator, you were the House Transportation and Public Works chairman, and you focused on first responders, DWI, and roadway safety.
It was awesome being chair of House Transportation because, there's been this thing between urban and rural in regards to road projects, and some of the legislation that I passed equalized funding across the board for everyone. So
Not just the big cities got
No,
everything.
and it's like, no, I think it's time for fairness, and, a lot of our urban or rural communities have the same needs the big city has, but we were able to get those projects done and improve those roads in a short amount of time. I really focused as a legislator on policing. It's what I know. I knew what the need was, even in regards to some of the laws that were introduced. I spoke up on some of those issues and wanted increased penalties on some of them. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, but I guess my biggest attribute was increasing funding for law enforcement for training and equipment. It's doubled. I was able to pass some legislation, not being there, but we got some stuff done this past session. And I look forward to the 60-day because we're going to be looking at how law enforcement officers are trained and the hours that are involved, and really kind of evolutionizing the process so our law enforcement communities will have time and space to address some of the trends that are occurring in their community.
And you believe in, with the Sheriff's Department, cameras for the sheriff's deputies and also the high technology that they're able to use?
Absolutely. I think as rapidly as technology is evolving, we need to make sure that our law enforcement officers have that technology. It's going to make our communities more safe. It's super easy way to be transparent, but I think the most important part is if there's an issue or challenge, we can be able to provide training to correct that behavior. We're all human, and we make mistakes. And if there's an opportunity for an officer to learn and grow from that decision that they made to make them more successful, then I'm going to pursue that. Everyone expects law enforcement to be perfect, and that's, I think, a little unreasonable, but what I'm going to be striving for as sheriff is excellence. Excellence in our profession and excellence in our engagement with the community.
I read on your website that training is important, transparency, targeting career criminals, ensuring violent offenders remain in custody before their trial dates, and, of course, addressing chronic safety concerns.
I've learned that the thing that drives people the most in craziness is road rage, drag racing in our communities. We've got, the off-road vehicles now, like quality of life things in our community really upset people, but the responding to the drug situation will be a little challenging, but I think we can accomplish great strides in disrupting that system. And I also think that ensuring that our deputies have that support and the department has someone who is a leader who won't deviate from their values can provide great change within that department. So I've experienced a lot in my servanthood, and I look forward to for the opportunity to be the next sheriff.
Are we fully supplied, or do we have the correct number of sheriff's deputies? I believe that we're kind of fully.
It's my understanding that they do. I think there's been a great opportunity for them to maintain full staff levels. But some of the things that I learned in the legislature is that there's a huge development that's being discussed that's going to be on county property on the west side. And if we're going to it's going to be like a mini Rio Rancho is what I'm hearing. And we're going to have to start preparing for that. So growing
in Bernalillo County or outside our county?
In Bernalillo County. So building out and increasing the numbers in the Sheriff's Department is going to be important for that. But not only that, we need to help APD. We need to help, let's erase that jurisdictional boundary that we have, and let's get in there and work together for the people in Albuquerque as well. I worked in all those different units, many cases with sheriff's deputies. So working with the Sheriff's Department was very familiar and comfortable. We used each other's resources and talents, and I don't know if that's happening right now. The biggest thing that comes up is the bail reform. I was there when that legislation was passed. I supported it. I actually had a bill that was going to require a bail for violent offenders, but there was something that was negotiated, and we passed that. And after seeing this past legislative cycle and some of the challenges to enhance and change that, I think the only way that that's going to happen is if the Supreme Court, by rule now requires that a person who can be detained has to have a conviction. So the Supreme Court
has to have a conviction? I thought they just had to have a potential to be violent. Detain them.
That's why they introduced the Arnold factor, and we can see how that's working out. But by rule of law, by the Supreme Court, detention requires a conviction.
A previous conviction.
Mm-hmm. So we need to really kind of explore, not only as a community, but a legislature and a judicial system, how do we approach that and bring that to the forefront in conversation with our Supreme Court? When we hear about judges releasing people and the community is upset, those judges are actually following the rule of law.
Mm-hmm. And you don't think the legislature has the fortitude to change it themselves?
I think they do, but once again, you're going to have to get the executive, the judicial, and the legislature together to figure it out, you know? And that's very challenging.
Yeah.
So I think my experience in everything that we've been talking about, if elected, I'll be the only sheriff who has been a legislator. And I think that's important to mention because if the legislature is going to be passing laws that are going to require law enforcement officers to enforce, we have to make sure that they're going to be able to. And we haven't seen some of that with some of the policies that have been passed. So we want to make sure that support the legislature to come up with policy that law enforcement can enforce, and I want to provide that voice and that experience for
but also
legislature.
From your end as the police officer, there's a lot of people and attorney generals and district attorneys who go to the legislature also to share their feelings on what kind of laws we do need.
Yep. I think being part of that process really opened my eyes that we need to improve the presence of law enforcement in our legislature in regards to conversation about laws. And it's tough. It's really tough to be there and advocate, but I have that experience and I've learned now I have both sides of the coin. Just like I do as a police officer, I understand the community side and the police side because of the advocacy work I did post-retirement. So we just have to get people together and we have to learn from one another. And great things would happen.
You've got the experience to share in both sides. Thank you, Pat Ruiloba, for your public service to our community, to our state for so many years.
Thank you.
And again, tossing your hat into the sheriff's race for Bernalillo County Sheriff.
Well, I appreciate the time to chat with you. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. And thank you and KCHF TV for introducing you to these candidates for a very important position as Bernalillo County Sheriff. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
In the Army National Guard, family means everything.
Our parents, they were really supportive that all 5 of us would join. I got my education because of the Guard. I got to travel a little bit and experience a whole different culture. It helped me get my job, helped me pay for my house. Being part-time really helped because I could have some opportunities that were still in education.
Serving part-time in the Army National Guard instills pride that you and your family will share. Visit NationalGuard.com to learn more about part-time service.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinnewater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.